Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hope Hub. So glad that you are here. You are obviously here for a reason that no one wants to be here for. But when we're all together, sharing in a community where other people get it, learning from each other, I think it makes things just a little bit better. And so I have the opportunity to interview a lot of really incredible experts who can help you along your widowhood journey. And today I am so excited to welcome Dr. Susan Trotter. Susan's been one of my biggest supporters since day one. I absolutely adore her as a person. But what she does is also very interesting and, very, very helpful. And I have her introduce herself, I want to, kind of do a little bit of a disclaimer that um, everybody is in a different place in whether or not they are looking for a relationship. And there are people who can never imagine dating anybody for the rest of their lives since their husbands have passed. There are people who are thinking about it but not yet ready to move forward. There are people who are already dating, and I just want this to be a safe place no matter where you are. That's okay. I'll have Susan speak a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to, share that right off the bat that, this is an inclusive community and wherever you are in your journey is 100% okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan. I'll let her introduce herself, tell you a little bit about what she does, and then maybe even elaborate on that, where
Yeah,
you are in your journey.
great. Thank you, Jen, and thank you so much for having me here. You are 100% right. I am one of your biggest fans, and I just really appreciate and believe in what you are creating for people. I think it's so important. There's such a need for it, and I feel grateful to be a part of it. So, thank you for having me. For those that don't know me, I am Susan Trotter. I started my career as a clinical psychologist. I practiced as a therapist for over 20 years, and then I shifted to coaching about 12 years ago. And I work exclusively as a relationship coach now. Having the clinical background is part of what makes me unique as a coach. It's pretty helpful in the work that I do with my clients. And I do a lot of different things in my practice, but I specialize in helping people who are in relationships and want to improve communication and connection. I do also help people going through divorce. I do a lot of work with individuals around mindset and self esteem and self confidence as well. And part of why we're here, I also have expertise in helping people who are interested in dating learn how to successfully navigate the dating world, both online and in person. Um, I come to do this work I started my career as a therapist. I shifted to coaching for a variety of different reasons, but doing similar kind of work throughout my life. I identify as a relationship coach because what became clear to me over time is that the core of my work is really about people's relationships with themselves and then with other people, because it
Yeah,
really does start with us, right?
absolutely.
So I do a lot of different things. I'm really glad to be here. I certainly have an understanding and appreciation for trying to rebuild after loss. Personally, I happen to be divorced, so that is my lived experience. But I did also lose my mother at a young age and support my dad through his journey after she passed. And of course, have supported clients throughout my practice, years of practice as well. Coming back to the dating, though, the piece that you were talking about, it is so, so important that people go at their own pace. And 100% wherever people are is not just okay, but like totally fine. And what's really most important, and I say this to anybody, but I think especially for people who have lost a spouse, it's important to just know where you are in your journey. And if you are somebody who right now imagines that you never want to have another relationship, then honor that, be true to that. If it's something you're thinking about and are scared, that's okay. Get the right support and the right guidance. And if you're already in it, there's lots of things that you can do to enhance the experience as well. And we'll get into all of that. But it is really important to know where you are in your journey and to give yourself time. I mean, I think one of the biggest things I would say though is give yourself time after losing your spouse to grieve, to reconnect with yourself. It's so many identity shifts, so many life changes. There's a lot to figure out, as you well know. And giving yourself time is a gift, truly, that you can give yourself. One is as a way to take care of yourself, and if you have kids, your family. But it also is going to set you up for more success down the road as well in life in general, but also in terms of future relationships.
Absolutely. And I am always incredibly honest and transparent in all of my communications with my community. And I will share that when I lost Jack, I very quickly jumped into dating because
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I needed a companion. I needed help. I needed love, like all these I need.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fine. That was my path, and I
Yep.
don't, I'm not ashamed of it. I talk about it
Mm-hmm.
openly. It was a distraction,
Right.
from the pain. I am
Mm-hmm.
obviously an extrovert. Like I thrive, I like to meet new people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I realized, about a year into that I had covered up a lot of the grief and the loss, and I hadn't really learned how to fulfill those needs without having a man in my life, in my case.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was just sharing with Susan before we got on the call that I've taken some time off from that,
Mm-hmm.
to really, as she said, reconnect with myself and to really think about um, you know, what it is that I want in a relationship. And I've been divorced and widowed. I'm also 47 years old, and I would
Mm-hmm.
like to have a life partner of sorts. Again, not for everyone, and I respect, no judgment. Everyone's
Mm-hmm.
different, but I like to try and be honest if, and it's share where I am at, and that's where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my first question to you, Susan, is if you're in that I think I'm ready phase, not in the I'm ready. So let's start with I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
ready. What are some things to perhaps, start some questions to ask yourself?
Sure, sure. I'll answer that question, but I just want to go back to something. Um, when I talk about taking time before you start dating,
Mhm.
first of all, I say that with no judgment.
Nope.
And I think but I do want to just clarify what I mean. It's if you, what I really encourage people to do is to be intentional. So
Yes.
like you jump right into it, totally fine. That's what you needed to do because you had all these needs that you wanted to get met, and that was a way to do it. Um, and it was probably unlikely that you were gonna in that phase find a life partner that
Yeah,
you were
no
gonna
way.
ride off into the sunset with because you were going into it with different kinds of needs, right?
Mhm.
So whatever people want to do, if they put themselves out there super early, I really just encourage people to be clear as they can with themselves and as intentional as possible. And if you just want to have fun, if you just want to have sex, if you just want somebody to go out with on a Saturday night, like
Mhm.
that's all totally fine. And if you ultimately want a committed lifelong relationship, then that's the point at which it's helpful to have taken some time to figure some things out and ask yourself questions. And I'll get into that in a second. That's what's going to set you up for success in that process. But I just wanted to comment on that because
Yeah,
people can do whatever they want, and not everybody is out there dating looking for a serious relationship, and
that's the other thing.
that's
Yeah.
totally fine, right? Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also, and I don't know, maybe you have some feedback on this too, because I do hear this a
mhm,
lot. A little bit sometimes sometimes from a judgmental of how can you think, you must have not loved your husband if you're
mhm.
thinking about dating somebody else. And
Mm-hmm.
I always say I'm not a therapist, I'm not a coach, I am not an expert. I only have lived experience, but I don't believe that to be true at all.
Hmm.
We are human beings. We
Yeah.
are, drawn to people. We are compassionate. We are
Hmm.
loving. And, again, if you have decided that your spouse was the love of your life and that's it, um,
Right.
that's amazing and beautiful. But if you
Hmm.
don't decide that and you are, in this,
Right.
as we say, this considering, it
Right.
doesn't mean that you didn't love your husband.
Right, right. 100%. It's kind of like for people who have children, you have one child and you think you could never love another child as
Yeah,
much. And then you have a second child, if you do, and like your heart just expands, right? Like there's no limit
I love
on
that.
how much we can love people in our lives or, connect with people, right? So, going on to date or thinking about loving somebody else doesn't mean that you didn't love your spouse. They're not mutually exclusive. You
Yeah.
can you can have loved the person you lost and still have room, have space for somebody new. And of course, there are some people that might judge that, and also people who just struggle with that internal conflict, right? And so
Sure.
that's where the readiness piece comes in.
Yes. Yes.
It's important, as we were saying, to kind of honor yourself, go at your own pace, give yourself time, check in with where you are. Do you feel ready in that regard? Um, but also, I think it's helpful to think about, you know, how much you're preoccupied, maybe still with the past. It's important to honor your past. And if you are still kind of ruminating in a way or, grieving, let's say, you know, in a way in which it takes up, still kind of
Hmm.
defining you,
Hmm.
then, that might be a sign that you're not totally ready
Hmm.
to invite somebody new in,
Right.
So again, this is where just kind of taking your temperature every once in a while, if you're thinking about it but not sure, how much does, being a widow define who you are?
Right.
Um, because, it's obviously such a huge part of your new identity, and it's not all of who you are, just like being divorced isn't all of who you are, or being a parent or a worker bee or whatever it is that you do. We are so many different things all at once. But when you lose somebody like that, that really does, your world gets a lot smaller in your head and in reality. And so you want to kind of check in with how much of your identity is tied up with that, and are you able to balance that, like honoring that part of who you are and your experience, and being open to new experiences.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and those are great kind of questions to ask
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And so, okay, I've asked myself these in questions. I I'm ready to be more intentional. What do I do now?
Yeah, yeah. So
There's the big bad world of dating, and that's the other, truth myth kind of thing that you
right.
hear is like, it's terrible out there, or it's amazing. And I just met, my
Mm-hmm.
I met Jack on Match, and so this
Mm-hmm.
was,
Yeah.
14 years ago, so it was very different worlds, but like there's a lot of like opinions out there about online
Right.
dating, and so maybe you can share some like, okay, I'm ready. Like, what are some things I should think about?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So look, the dating world is full of challenges.
Mhm.
Let's be real. It is a challenging world, more so since the pandemic. Um, and it's important to know how to approach it in terms of your thinking, because mindset is really important. And then it's also important to understand how to navigate it on a practical level. Um, so just taking a step back in terms of setting yourself up for success in this process, just in general, and then I'll speak more specifically, for people who are dating after losing a spouse. Um, first of all, understanding that what you put out is what you get back. And so, if you are confident and positive, you're much more likely to attract people who are also confident and positive and are going to make you feel good. And of course, the alternative is true. Negativity tends to attract negativity. Taking time to review your history and thinking
Mhm.
about your marriage and maybe prior relationships, what worked, what didn't, what did you want and need then, what do you want and need now. It might be very different. um, and also understanding your past dynamics and the roles that you played in them, and whether kind of asking yourself whether or not those dynamics served you very well or not. I think too, you know, I think sometimes there may be an assumption, and you maybe can speak more to this from your experience and the work that you do, but that when somebody loses a spouse, I think there can be a tendency to idealize the person who died and the relationship. And the reality is, just like any other relationship, like there may have been a lot of challenges in that relationship too.
Mhm.
And I think, getting yourself ready for a relationship requires being honest with yourself too about, again, what worked, what didn't, what was the dynamic, what served you well, what parts maybe didn't serve you well, and what do you want to do and have be different going forward. And that's
Absolutely.
perfectly okay. I think, you can honor what you had and still assess it, with
And learn from
honesty
it.
and learn from it. 100% learn from it, because that's what's going to help you going forward.
Um,
We are works in progress forever, whether you're married, divorced, widowed. Like, there are always things for us to learn, um, about ourselves and how we want to show up in the world. And
Absolutely. And I
we have
think
the power to make that happen. Yeah, go ahead.
absolutely. I was to say, I think the other thing that I would add to that, that I spend a lot of time on in all of my life is around expectations. And,
Mm,
making sure that you're setting realistic expectations for
yep.
yourself so that you're not
Hmm.
constantly disappointed and then feeling like a failure and beating yourself up. And I think for a lot of us, including myself, I put, Jack or our husbands on a pedestal, and they were these
Hmm.
incredible, amazing, and you're maybe not going to find somebody that is exactly like him.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't find somebody that is either equal or you have a compatibility with while you
Right.
still
Right.
keep him, in
Right.
your mind. And so
Right.
it was something, I mean, I learned it really recently. I actually did date a guy for a couple of months, and I realized that I had this really high expectation of what passion was, because I had a lot of passion with Jack, and then it wasn't very fair of me or for him to
Mm,
compare.
hmm.
And
Right.
so, kind of figuring out, how to not compare, I think is a
Right.
huge, and it's hard.
Abs-
It's
Absolutely.
so hard.
Right. Right.
It's
No,
so hard.
absolutely. That's one of the things that I think is really important, is trying to avoid those comparisons as much as you can.
Yeah.
I think shared values is really foundational in a
Mm,
good relationship. And so you're probably going to meet people and date people who have similar values as your spouse did,
mhm.
because core values are, they're intrinsic to who we are, right? And if you share that with your spouse, you're going to want to share that with your future partners too. um, and they're going to be different. Nobody is going to be exactly the same. And so, to your point, you know paying attention to the expectations you have, checking yourself, if you're
Yeah.
projecting too much, and trying to avoid those comparisons as much as possible, and just being present to where you are and who's in front of you and so forth. And also, I would just add too, like, you're not going to get it right 100% of the time, because we're all human. And I think it's really important to give ourselves grace and compassion, just
Yeah.
like we would with people we care about in our lives. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Sometimes
say
it's
that
too,
all the time. You know,
yeah,
unrelated to, just give
right,
yourself some grace. Like
right,
nothing's going to happen immediately. It's just the way,
Right,
we are all so
right.
trained for this immediate gratification. It's the way that this world is, turned us into these like immediate
Hmm.
gratification like
Right,
monsters. And it doesn't work that way for a lot of things, and dating is certainly falls in that category.
right. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The
So
other thing
let's
I
get
would
into
say,
some of the like practical, like, okay,
yeah,
I think I
yeah,
have this, I think I'm ready to test the waters. Where do I start?
yeah, yeah.
I know that's
So
a
I'm gonna.
big question.
It is a big question, and I have a 2 hour dating and relationship webinar that I
And
do.
and so
So
yes,
I'm
we
giving
should
the
definitely
abbreviated version.
give me the abbreviated
I'm
version, and
giving you the
then everyone should
highlights.
go watch that because it's really good.
Yeah,
I've seen it
I'm
before.
I'm giving you just the highlights. One thing I will say for anybody who's dating is that it can be really helpful to create what I call like a good, joyful life for yourself. And that's a good place from which to date. And the reason is that when you are okay on your own and you have a good life, it frees you up to then be more selective and more intentional about who you invite in.
Mm,
And you want to invite in people who are going to enhance your life for the if you're looking for a long-term partner, and not just be there to fill voids if you're lonely, if you're this or if you're that. It really does help. After my divorce, when I was dating, again, totally different set of circumstances. But I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm good on my own. And I waited to date. I created a really nice life for myself. I was comfortable by myself. I had good friends. I had work I loved. I had lots of interests. And so I was clear that I would rather be alone than be with the wrong person. That was kind of one of my mantras. And if I was going to invite somebody in, then they needed to be my version of spectacular. That was kind of my word.
I love
Has
that.
meaning just for me, but each of you, each person can kind of come up with their own word. But getting to that place of being okay by myself, having created that full life, allowed me to be really intentional about who I dated. And that meant that I really just dated good people. They didn't all turn into relationships, but they were all like good quality people. And we had some things in common, and that matters because if you have positive experiences, even if it doesn't turn into something with good people, your mindset throughout the process is going to be a lot better. But if you're too quick to meet people and you haven't kind of thought about this and you get disappointed over and over again, then your mindset's going to get more disheartened, more frustrated, more negative. And then that's the lens through which you're engaging in it. And that's part of why so many people say the dating world is awful, because they're just, going round and round in circles and not being intentional and having bad experiences. It happens,
Yeah.
but there are ways to minimize those, and it has to do with you and taking care of yourself and doing these things that I'm saying. Um, so where do you start? You're going to have kind of thought about all these things that we're talking about. I do encourage people to get out, in the world and do the things that you enjoy. It creates that joyful life for yourself. You might meet somebody you're interested in. You might make some new friends. Maybe they know somebody. So it's just good to get out in the world. People don't really fix each other up that much anymore like they did. My parents met on a blind date. They were fixed up by a mutual friend. It doesn't happen quite as much, but if you're open to that, I encourage people to like let your whatever world you want to know about that, and then remind them again every once in a while. And then online dating. Oh, bless you.
Sorry.
I couldn't hear it, but I can see it.
I know I
Um,
paused. I mean, I
I
muted
know.
myself, so we didn't. Sorry.
um, and online dating, I'm a huge fan of online dating, and it's a weird little world, and you need to know how to navigate it. For people who are brand new to online dating, I tend to recommend a site like Match, which is structured for people to share more information about themselves versus other dating apps like Bumble or Hinge, where you only have like so many characters, or a small little space, maybe room for 3 sentences to say what you want to say, or to read and try to assess whether or not somebody's a good person and you have some compatibility. So I think there's value in starting with sites that are less structured and people can share more info. So then you can present yourself more fully in the way that you want. And your profile, by the way, is designed to attract the people you want. So being able to do that intentionally is important. It also is a better way, especially at the beginning of this journey, to assess people. If you only have like 2 or 3 sentences, and some people don't even do that, they just throw up some pictures and check off a few boxes, demographic information. But if at the most you have is 3 sentences to assess somebody, it's really, really hard to assess them. So these sites that are more unstructured just are a way for you to get more information up front, and to remember that everything people present about themselves is information. And your task is to kind of gather all that information and assess, like, are they a decent person? Do we have some compatibility? Do we share some values and so forth? So if you want to do online dating, you want to start with that. The other thing I would say with online dating is that the messaging is really important, messaging through the site. It's another way to gather information. A lot of people use the messaging more like texting and shorthand. They exchange a couple messages and then make a date, or they just talk about the weather and their day and whatever. And then it just kind of like burns out, because where do you go from there? When I was dating, with people that I really connected with, like we would exchange like paragraphs back and forth, not like pen pals for weeks on end, but over the course of the week, we would exchange a lot of messages that had some lightness and flirtiness, but also some depth,
Hmm.
because I was gathering more information before I would go out and meet them,
Right.
because going out and meeting somebody is a bigger investment of time, energy, and emotion. And so if you don't vet them a little bit more upfront and you meet them and they're a total dud, you're going to feel much more disappointed than if you figure that out just by communicating online with them.
And I think, I've heard some of these suggestions before from you, and I think one of the ones that I've always really taken to heart is what you're saying, in the messaging process is don't be afraid to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be afraid to ask hard questions.
Right.
Because you'll be able to see people's willingness to share with you, ask about their family, ask about their
Mm-hmm.
careers, ask about their, if they have children, what their relationship is like with them.
Right.
These are questions that normally you'd be like, yeah, it's a little bit deep or a little bit, but like
Mm-hmm.
that's just,
Yeah.
that's a way, as Susan said, if you're going to take time out of your life to go meet that person, you want to know a little bit about that up front. You don't have to know their whole
Right.
life story. Um,
Exactly.
but enough,
Right.
just enough. And so,
Yeah.
hey, what'd you do last weekend? Which is like such a
Right.
common like, you know, message
Right.
starter. What are you up to this weekend? Okay,
Right.
that's fine. I'm up to doing this and this. Oh, and then it's kind of, you can kind of say, well, are you doing this because you're interested? And I don't know, I could kind of go
Right.
riff
Right.
on this
Right.
forever, but
Yep.
I will tell
a
you
hundred
just based on
percent.
the experience I've had. And again, I was divorced and I did the online dating world. And so I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, whether I like it or not, I have to accept this is part two for me. There are a lot
Mm-hmm.
of like very surface level questions in
Right.
the messaging part of it.
Yeah. And when you're willing to put out those more open ended, somewhat deeper questions, and not every question has to be
Mm,
deep, by the way, but
yeah.
if when you put out those kinds of questions, you get so much information back, like not just like the content, like what they say, but how do they respond? Do they answer your question? Do
Mhm.
they answer it in a one-word answer, or are they more
Mhm.
expansive?
Yeah.
What's their tone? How do they talk about their family or their kids or their former spouse or ex, or
Right.
like there's so much information that you get to gather if
Yeah.
you're willing to ask those kinds of questions. And again, people always say, I don't want to be a pen pal. I'm not talking about, exchanging messages for weeks on end.
Yeah.
But, if you're connecting with someone, there's some momentum. There's going to be what I call a flurry of messages that go back and forth within a relatively short period of time, like within a week. And then you can meet if all looks good.
Well, thank you for so much of this insight. Like you mentioned, or like Susan mentioned, she does do a 2-hour webinar on this where
Hmm.
there's so much more information. But the other thing that I love that Susan does is she meets one-on-one with you. And she will she'll help you, like if you don't know what you want, she'll help you figure out, perhaps give you some insight into what you want by looking at, as she mentioned, past relationships, what you want for the future. She'll also help you write your profile,
Hmm.
which
Yep.
for so many of us is the scariest part ever.
Hmm.
And then, through the process of responding, I think I was saying to her in the beginning, like what she does is so needed, because it is a big world out there.
Yeah.
So, Susan, why don't you, just tell us a little bit about what you have coming
Yep.
up, where people can find you,
Sure.
all of that information.
Yeah, sure. I will. I appreciate that. Two quick things I want to say. One is that I work with my dating clients, range in age from 20s to 80s, all different life circumstances. Some who have never had a relationship, some who are divorced, widowed, two, three times, all the whole gamut. I work with a lot of, I mean, a whole range, but also some very successful people. It doesn't matter how old you are, how successful you are. There is something about dating that makes everybody feel like an insecure 16-year-old again. It just happens. And so I just, first of all, want to normalize that for
Yeah.
people. Like it is normal to feel anxious about all of this. And the other thing I just want to comment on too before I share about how to contact me or what I have going on. I think for people who've lost a spouse, it's also important to remind yourself that it's okay to experience joy without guilt.
Hmm.
And I think that's, particularly for widows, like that's part of that internal conflict I think that we were referencing a bit before. And I just wanted to comment on that again, like you can have loved your spouse and the life that you had and
Hmm.
go on and create new relationships and a different kind of future for yourself. It might not have been what you imagined, and it can still be a beautiful thing.
Yeah. No,
It's yeah,
I couldn't agree with that more. And it's kind of along the lines of that you're allowed to have two feelings at once. You're
right,
allowed to be
exactly.
devastated and then have them, and have some joy in your life. You're
Hmm.
allowed to be, lonely but also feel loved. They're
Right,
definitely. Thank you
right,
so much for
right.
pointing that out.
Yeah,
And we don't really have time for this, but I think,
yeah.
another piece to get into also that people ask a lot about, and if you have follow-up questions on this, obviously come back to Susan,
Hmm.
is, can I talk about my spouse or my,
Hmm.
my deceased
Right,
spouse and how much
right.
and what's uncomfortable? And, I think that's another
Hmm.
kind of question. And one of the
Right.
things that I see, online and with other widows who have met somebody else is one thing that they appreciate about that new partner is that that new partner allows them
Hmm.
to
Right.
still have that person in there as part of their
Absolutely.
realm. And there's can still
Right,
be pictures in the house and there
right,
can still be conversations. And so,
right.
again, whole another big topic we can get
That
into,
is
but
it.
I
Yeah.
I think people get really wrapped up in like, can I even say his name? Like,
Hmm.
and if
Right.
you can't, then that's not the right person.
Right, right.
At least, from
Absolutely.
what I've
I mean,
seen.
again, there's a balance, right?
Mhm.
Like
Oh
if
yeah,
you're
you don't want to be
talking
talking
about
about them
them
constantly
all
because
the
that's
time, right? That's going to interfere in the new developing
yeah,
relationship, and it's part of your story. And you do want to be with somebody who is comfortable enough and confident enough with themselves and the relationship they're building with you to give space for that. And if they're not, that's information for you about them and likely not being quite right for you,
yeah.
even if other things might align. So, yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
so where can people find out
yeah,
more?
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
we could talk forever.
We could talk forever, but thank you. Yeah, so I am on all social media, Facebook mostly, Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are my primary platforms. You can find me at www.susantrotterphd.com, and Susan Trotter PhD is kind of my name or username, handle, whatever, across everything. Um, And I offer a complimentary consultation to anybody who is interested in learning more, and they can reach out to me through social media, or my email is just susantrotterphd@gmail.com. So yeah, people can just reach out. I work with people individually. I do work with couples. I do some work also with families, like adults and not young children, but adults and adult children sometimes. And then on a practical level, with the dating clients, I help people create profiles and learn the practical ways of managing that world. I'll be launching a dating group for women actually in the fall. So I'm
Ooh.
really excited about that. So look for that. And I also do a lot of teaching. Usually, whatever I am presenting is posted on my social media, so people can find it there. I teach in a lot of different places these days. So
Great.
just reach out if anybody has any questions.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't speak highly enough about Susan as a human being too. She's fun and honest and, just a delight to connect with. And so thank you so much for joining us. I think this is, such a big
Mhm.
topic, I hate to call it a topic, that's the wrong word, but just such a big, question I think that people
Mhm.
have, maybe not right away or maybe right away, but it certainly at
Mhm.
some point. And
Right.
really, like you said in the beginning, being able to check in with yourself and see where you are. And I like, the word that I've taken, the word of the day from you, both from our conversation before we did this, and it is the intentionality, is
Yeah.
how, being really intentional versus being like, the wild woman who's just
Mhm.
like trying all kinds of, there's a strategy behind everything in life. It's so funny.
Mhm.
My daughter is, starting to get into the college application world, and like there's a whole strategy behind that. Like just like
Right.
there's a whole
Right.
strategy around online dating. And so
Absolutely.
working with an expert like Susan is incredibly helpful. So
Thank you
thank
so
you
much,
all so
Jen.
much for joining us. And again, if you have any questions, SusanTrotterPhD.com, and all of her social handles are there. And book a consult, and you'll learn a lot. Um,
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you to this community. I appreciate all of you so much. I truly believe that community isn't just life-changing, it's life-saving, and that we can't do this
Mhm.
alone. So thank you for being a part of my community and a part of each other's.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.